And welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. This is our new little blog and it's called Cryptic Creatures and the Unexplained, finding answers across the globe, because I've got a real interest in seeing if all of this phenomena actually meets in the middle somewhere, or it's all part of the same thing. And I think many people think I get the sighting report and put them out immediately, and that doesn't happen very often, as my friend Gordon can attest. And this story tonight is being sent in to me by Gordon, who lives up in Scotland. And he sent it me probably around 12, 14 months ago, something like that. And it's taken me that long to put it together. And I like to have a really good look at the area. So I normally go back through any old newspaper archives, historical records, paranormal groups, forums, anything I can think of that might show an anomaly in an area. And sometimes the history books are our absolute best place to be looking, and that's what I found on this story. So as I say, this is from my friend Gordon, and thank you for sending it in, because I absolutely adore myth and legend, as it's called, but that's not what it is to me. To me, it's lore, and it's lore of early England, when we were back in the day, when we were Albion, Caledonia. And this comes from the area of Caledonia that most people know is Scotland. And as I say, as children, we are taught to sing this song. And it's the song of Aiken Drum. But what most people don't know is the song of Aiken Drum is based on the legend of the Brownie of Blednoch and the Pictish brown boy. So there's an old tale, as I say, and as the tale's reported, it says, this happened a long time ago in Scotland. But if you listen closely, you will probably still hear the children singing of the little man named Aiken Drum. He came one night out of the blue, and it was dusk, just when the milking was done, and before the children had gone to bed. People were standing outside on their doorsteps, talking about the fine springtime weather, when they heard the strangest humming sound coming from down the river. The sound came nearer and nearer, and everybody stopped talking and looked down the long road. They stared and rubbed their eyes when they glimpsed this bewildering sight. The most frightful creature anyone has ever seen was walking right into their village, and he was a wee man, covered from head to toe in hair, and wore only a little kilt woven of green rushes. His hair hung forward, nearly covering his face, and his beard was so long it almost touched the ground, and it was blue. His little legs were twisted, and his arms were long enough to touch the ground, and he was humming, sure enough, and as he came closer, people heard the words he sang. Hey ye, any work for Aiken Drum? Well, you can imagine how afraid everybody was, and the children screamed and hid their faces in their mothers' skirts. Little boys threw down their pails of milk, and dogs sneaked behind their masters. Women shrieked, and grown men laughed and hooted, but they were shaking also. But old Granny Duncan, the kindest and wisest woman in the village, stepped right off her porch and said to everyone, hold on, he may be a ghost or a demon, or he may be a little harmless brownie, and there's only one way to find out. And she marched right into the middle of that road and held the Holy Bible out in front of the strange little man. And he simply went on walking past, singing out his song, begging for work. He's a brownie, Granny Duncan said, and if we treat him well, he will treat us just as well. So everyone gathered round the little man, and they could see when he was close that his hairy face was kind and gentle. The brownie looked around and then said, I come from a nameless land, and it's a different place than this. There we learn to serve, so I've come to see if there is any work here to be done. There's but one thing you must promise. I want no wages or thanks. All I ask for is a corner of a barn to sleep in and a little wee drink at bedtime. And if no one meddles with me, I'll do my best kind of work that you need done. No one knew quite what to say, for no one had ever heard of someone offering services for nothing. But old Granny Duncan spoke again. You heard the man. Well, that settled things. The miller offered Aiken Drum, for that was his name, a corner of his barn to sleep in, and Granny Duncan promised to bring him a wee drink every night. Then everyone said good night. By the end of the week, people were singing a different tune about old Aiken Drum. Wherever he was, wherever he came from, he was a wonderful worker. He did much of his work at night and when everyone else was asleep. Whenever there was a sickly child in need of nursing, or a flock of sheep to be gathered on a stormy night, or a bundle to be carried home, Aiken Drum almost always learned of it and appeared just in time. Pretty soon people came from all over the countryside to catch a glimpse of Aiken Drum. But a Brownie will never be seen if you're looking for him. The little children adored Aiken Drum and he loved them. Whenever they could, they would meet him in the fields, and there the older folk could hear the sounds of sweet singing. Everything might have been well if one young woman hadn't thought she knew better than everybody else. She decided Aiken Drum must be paid, and one night she took a pair of her husband's worn-out breeches and put them down in the barn beside Aiken Drum's drink. Well, the long and the short of it was this. Aiken Drum was gone in the morning, and no one ever saw him again. Now, some say he disappeared because his new finery made him too proud for work. Some say he'd been rewarded and so was free of his curse. Some say it was just that he asked people to promise, and when they broke their promise, he went away. Granny Duncan said that they should have kept their promise to him, but when they broke it, they broke his heart. Still, in this little Scottish village, some say they can hear him singing down in the mill when they pass. The children still sing about him, and everyone knows there are brownies in the world and fairy kingdoms, and if anyone says there are none, the villagers laugh and tell the tale of Aiken Drum. Now, the legend is well ground within the UK, and that there's, as I say, there is a song that we sing for children named Aiken Drum. Now, in the nursery rhyme, Aiken Drum wears entirely edible clothes, and brownies are usually associated with food. They often make themselves responsible for the farm or the house in which they live by doing chores that have been left undone by servants, or by herding sheep. And this is the picture here of it, as you can see, or collecting eggs. Heads. Ooh. A brownie will often become personally attached to a member of the household, and in return he has a right to a bowl of cream, or the best milk they have, or to be especially good cake or cheese. Brownies are often given clothing in exchange for their work, but money or reward is thought to drive them away. William Henderson's Folklore of the Northern Counties describes the little treats left for brownies as knuckled cakes made from meal warm from the mill, toasted over the embers and spread with honey. So I would imagine kind of like a drop scone or a griddle cake. Now, the association with food and clothing does seem to link the Aiken Drum of the song with the Scottish brownie. And there are some descriptions in Briggs of the brownie as the brownie looking monstrous, having no nose or an enormous mouth, or webbed fingers and claws. Now, I have to admit, when researching the brownie of Blednoch, I was struck by the resemblance in appearance and habit to the old legend of the Pictish brown boy. And indeed, one witness to such a small and unusual mud-covered folk claims as a boy to see not only one, but losing his coat to one in the process, he states. I wanted to point out that during my childhood, at a picnic on Cairn Papal Hill, with my mother and brother, that my brother, who had gone off to play, had given his new coat to the brown boy on the hill, who subsequently disappeared with it. One researcher who visited the witness had a very strange experience when he visited the area. He said the hill began to shake underneath his feet, as if the ground itself was ready to open up. There are some very strange reports from the mountain at Cairn Papal, and you can access them on the British Bigfoot map or at the blog, or in the description below there is a link. Cairn Papal, Scotland, footprints, bluff charges, and a figure cited, 2003, 2006, 2009. Early in the winter of 2003, I'd recently passed my driving test and was going for a run in the car with my friend and his girlfriend. I'm from the Falkirk area, so we came up through Aiken, and we were not really heading in any particular direction. I was just happy to be driving, and the view from the car was perfect. I saw a sign for Carnpapel and recognised it, so I started heading up that way, and I passed the lane by there at Carnpapel. We drove past it and down and up the valley, and as we were headed towards the Knock Hill, my mate pointed out what looked like a man standing at the top, looking down the hill at us. I slowed the car down to look and saw he was right. And I said, "Oh, yeah, so it does." By this point, we were slowly passing the Knock Hill, and the dark figure came down the hill at great speed. He was really moving at some pace, and we got a big fright, and I drove away as fast as I could. It didn't look like your average person, and it was all dark in colour, and it moved at a pace miles faster than I could. Now, that incident remained pretty much unexplained, and yes, it gave us a scare, but I didn't think too much of it and had forgotten about it until a few years later in the spring of 2006. I was out again for a drive with my mate, and we were bored, and it was a nice night, so we decided to head up to the Bathgate Hills. And if it was clear, we could wander up to Carnpapel and get a good view of central Scotland. And it's been snowing about a week before, and the snow had melted back home, but there was still a little bit by the side of the road up there. This didn't put us off, as there hadn't been much. So we parked up at the Carnpapel lay-by and headed up the stairs. The field before Carnpapel was snow-covered, and although we were not dressed for it, we kept heading in anyway. We had a laugh falling in the snow repeatedly, and I fell waist-deep into a cairn at the Carnpapel site. We were there for a few minutes before getting cold, and we started to head back. The wind was picking up, and visibility was a bit poor by this time. We left the gate of Carnpapel and walked back into the field, and within 15 seconds we both heard a noise from behind us, as if something was coming towards us, from the direction we'd just been. I turned around, but I could not see anything. Neither of us could. All we knew is that it was coming, and it was coming fast. Or at least it sounded as if it was moving really quickly at speed, heading straight in our direction. We ran as fast as we could, and we ended up losing the way back down the stairs. After a panicked hunt for the steps, we found them, and we rushed down them and got into the car and drove away. We couldn't explain what happened to us, and we were shaken up and very confused. We kept talking about it and deciding whether to go back or not, and I couldn't stop thinking about it and what had happened. You would think that after two scary experiences, I would avoid the place, but in the winter of 2009, I returned from Australia and it had snowed, and I was hunting for a good place to sledge with my friend. I suggested the Bathgate Hills would be a good place due to the height, and there would be no shortage of snow. It was pretty late as we arrived, at about 15 a.m, just after midnight, and headed up Carnpapel first. Once we were up, we realised quickly that the snow was too deep and no good for fun, so we walked to the Carnpapel site to have a look. After a while it started to snow, so we headed back to the car. And once again, after leaving the fence and we got into that field, something started to chase us. My friend was really frightened and started to run, and at this point I remembered the previous encounter. I calmed it down and explained it would stop in a second if we left the area of the steps immediately, and we moved as fast as we could without losing the way to the staircase and got back to the car. The snow was really heavy now, but she pointed out footprints leading into the field we had just come out of. These were fresh footprints and caused us to become very scared. Whilst trying to leave the car, we got stuck approaching the Knock Hill, and it took us a while to manage to get up the hill. I had to drive carefully due to the conditions, and as we approached the Knock Hill again, there was fresh footprints in the snow, coming from the field and going into the car park at Knock Hill. These footprints looked like they had been by someone running. After that, we were really shaken up, and I shared my previous experience with her. The next day, we returned with a friend and retraced our steps. There were no animals in the field at this time, and it was very peaceful. We have returned in safer numbers during the night a few times, but with nothing other than some creepy noises happening. I hope you enjoy reading about my experiences, and the last one was particularly terrifying. And there is something about that place that makes you want to go back. My friend that was speechless for the car journey back to Falkirk and they never slept that night. But we still returned over and over. We continue to do so, to try and understand. There's a very strange account that I took from a gentleman in the Bathgate Hills, and he was camping with another friend, and they had a tent each, and they were up near the reservoir there, and he nodded off in his tent, and he said he remembers coming to, and it was almost as if he was pulled out of his body, and he was looking down on the scene, and what he describes as the large hairy biped walked from one wood through the camp and down to another wood. And he did say at one point it changed its expression from an almost alien looking grey-green face to a full brown hairy Bigfoot. And when he came back to his body with a jolt and he came round, he could hear his friend screaming in the tent because his friend had also seen it, but he wasn't out of his body having an out-of-body experience. He was in the tent when the creature passed through on those hills. And it's the same hills where these experiences have happened. And if you look in historical records, the Picts were descended from the Caledonian tribes, and some of which were said to dye their hair a red colour. Now, the Picts' appearance varied from region to region and also time period, because they were here for a very long time. So originally, many were said to have black hair with long, slender faces and were sometimes considered somewhat short in stature. And they were known as great fighters, and they fought nude because it made them appear more frightening and allowed them to move freely. Now, those living in the south, in the kingdom of Fib, were sometimes described as having fair blonde hair. This would be handed down as they would have been married in with the Britons and then the Saxons. And in the north, as the Gaels in Flux from Ireland, a lot of the Picts took on traits like brown or ginger or red hair, and they were no longer called short, but sometimes described as being very tall. They were said to be masters at extraditing all manner of hallucinogenic plants, and were known to keep entire clans under their power. So much so, many of the legends speak of the Picts as the stealer of people. They often sold entire communities under the influence of drugs, which made them much easier to handle. They were the original zombie makers, you could say. Their slaves were prized for their agility and almost zombie-like control. They're like zombies, except that they're very limber, incredibly fast, and very strong. However, they're always depicted as dead warriors who never speak, but in a nonsensical jabbering, or they're totally mute, that they can understand when being spoken to. Thank you for visiting our site, and if you've experienced something strange in the UK or anywhere else worldwide, please let us know. If you want to join and become a member of our community and go out and investigate some of these reports, either on your own or with a few other members, just let me know. Get in touch with me on email at debbiehatswell@gmail.com, all lowercase. So until next time, thank you all. Good night.